And the main thing I need to tell you right this minute is that I am, in fact, Rafe is the founder and president of ServCollab. I'm going to introduce Kosai in just a minute. Kosai, please turn your microphone on so you can say hi. It's off at the moment. So,
Well,
Kosai is vice president for ServCollab. He joined ServCollab almost a year ago. So he's about 2 weeks away from being a 1 year employee of ServCollab. And I needed to make sure I introduced him because he's vice president, but also there's a connection to why we're all here. And that is that Kosai started as a volunteer, and his role as a volunteer was to organize an effort to form ServCollab communities. That effort started before he became an employee. It started in the spring of last year with PhD students from Belgium, as a matter of fact, 5 PhD students from Belgium, some of whom are in the call right now. And there are others from our community in the call today. So, from the PhD student community, we went from there to the idea of an early career community. And this is by the time that COSI was already an employee. So, we now have two communities, PhD students and the wisdom community. Both groups, as they've met and worked on things, started talking about how they could learn more from the service research themes that were published 2 years ago on behalf of ServCollab and the Journal of Services Marketing. So we worked with the two groups to develop this webinar series. This is one of 8 webinars that we planned. This is the launch of that. And I'll tell you more about Rebekah Russell-Bennett, who's the person leading this off in just a moment. But before I get to that, let me emphasize that the purpose of this is to dig deeper on these service research themes. 2 years ago, we did a compressed program as a webinar on the service research themes. We also did a pre-conference event about the service research themes. And I mentioned the pre-conference event because at ServSeed, Kosai and I will be doing a pre-conference wisdom quest, we call it. It will also come back to these service research themes. When Rebekah and I began working on these service research themes, our idea was pure and simple that we would be focusing on enduring topics, that these would be topics that would last long beyond the 2030 United Nations Sustainable Development date of 2030. So that's the key thing there. There are many other things that we are doing in ServCollab. So this is a very exciting time to launch this series. We've got activities at the conference coming up, ServC conference that I just mentioned, and actually presentations in the conference. We also have presentations COSI and I will be doing at the Frontiers and Service Conference. We have a newsletter coming out. Allison Jobert will be the editor of that newsletter, and it will be out next week if everything goes right. It'll all go out next week. And as I said, this is a big event for us. And I left out one key thing to remind you about, and that is that we have research grants that are quarterly. They are synchronized a month after each webinar. So we're trying to build momentum for people doing research that fits these 7 service research themes. And the research grants and the webinars together are a nice combination. One more key thing to do, and that is to make sure that I emphasize that in asking Rebekah, there was other co-authors that worked with Rebekah on this first paper, but she and I were the ones who got in the stage of developing this whole program. We were the ones who basically we were the ones who started with the idea, and I have to tell you when, because the idea started back in July 2022, July 7th. I looked it up on my email log, July 7th, 2022. Rebekah and I started talking about how ServCollab and the Journal of Services Marketing, which she was co-editing, could work together. It's a great example of collaboration. From there, a week later, we had formulated the 7 service research themes. That's it. Surprisingly how quick we did that, but we did. The two of us had formulated a compression of the 17 into 7. And by a week later, we'd invited all the commentary authors. Excuse me, not a week later, a month later, in August of that year. So all of that came together very quickly and very importantly. So now more about Rebekah. Rebekah is the Associate Dean of Research of the Faculty of Business, Government, and Law, and a marketing professor at the University of Canberra. She's ranked #1 in transformative service research globally. She's previously the co-editor of the Journal of Services Marketing, which of course is how we ended up doing those commentaries. And importantly, she is obsessed with social impact research. Very obsessed with that. And I could elaborate with more details, but I won't try to go through some of those other details. You can find them in the biography that we posted before this event. Most recently, Rebekah started the Journal of Social Impact and Business Research, or Business Research, I should say. And that's become a major new part of her efforts to expand social impact. And of course, this effort that she's going to talk about with us today is based on social impact too. So with that, Rebekah, I should let you take it away from here.
Okay, so let me share my screen. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yes. Great. Okay, well, thank you all for having me. Good evening from Australia. It's a bit cool here. So I live about 2 hours from the snowy mountains. Yes, Australia does have an alpine region, hence the jacket. Good morning to those of you from different parts of the world. So I've been invited to kick off this wisdom series with really the editorial and the idea behind the different research themes. And then following on from tonight's webinar, there'll be a different well, there'll be other webinars that will go into more detail in each of those different commentary pieces. So just as a bit of backstory, as to why I did this. So in 2022, when I was at JSM, I knew that I had 2 years left on my tenure, and I wanted to do something that I thought was bringing everything together and doing like a really important piece of work. And one of the things that I'd noticed was there was lots of calls for papers going on around the SDGs. So you'd see these calls in all the different journals, and then when the special issue would actually come out, it didn't cover all the SDGs. It was typically a focus on there'd be health and maybe a couple of others. And it sort of occurred to me that that's not very helpful for researchers if you're only covering some of the SDGs. And it was the same ones that were coming out. And part of the problem when you do a call for special issues is you don't know what you're going to get. You know, it's like life is a box of chocolates. So you've got to wait and see what comes in, right? So if you don't get things coming in on all 17 SDGs, well, then you can't publish on it. And so I wanted a way of making sure that we were covering all of the SDGs. And so, and I'll get to the themes that we put together. And so I reached out to Ray and sort of asked what he thought about it. We worked up a way of synthesizing it. And then I didn't want to do just a general call and hope that I'd get all the 7 covered, because I knew that it was unlikely to work. And so what I did was I reached out to people who were known in the service community in each of those different areas and asked them if they would be interested in putting together a commentary. And so what we did was we put the teams together. And in many instances, some of these people had never worked before, and some of them had never even met before. And so one of the things that I really like that's come out of this is that because there was such common interest around the themes, that some of these commentary teams have continued working. And so not only did we talk about collaboration, we also enabled collaboration to occur. And so people were remarkably compliant in the instructions, because I wanted a commentary series where there was a fairly common structure. And so if you read each of the commentary series, you'll see that the structure is pretty similar. And that was done purposefully. So I wanted it to be like an edited series where people had the freedom to say what they wanted to say, but to do it, you know, in a certain way. And so you will notice that common element. They were all peer reviewed. Some went through more feedback than others, and they all did get through the system. We did have a few authors drop out. We had a few authors that ended up joining. But that's kind of the story of how the JSM series came to be. And it's published in the 2024 volume. Okay, so the topic of improving life on planet Earth. Well, why are we doing this? Well, it's because we've got a strong belief that service research can contribute to global problems and improve human welfare. If we didn't believe that, we wouldn't be doing any of what we're doing. And the goal of the series was to use the UN Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs, as a blueprint for action. And so then the partnership was formed between the Journal of Services Marketing and ServCollab. So one of the inspiration sources for this, and it came out of an article that I worked on with Ray, Joe Previty, and Linda Alkaya and published in the Journal of Service Management. And it's all about, it was drawing on donut economics. Now, I'd never heard of donut economics until Ray introduced me to it. And please note the British spelling of the word donut. Donut economics really resonated with me. And it's really a way of thinking about planet Earth and about humans and how we interact. And what I like about donut economics, and it's a framework put forth by Dr. Kate Rayworth from Oxford University, and she's an economist, but she challenges a lot of the common economics thinking that's out there. If you Google donut economics, there are TED Talks that go for 5 minutes. There's lots of things to download if you want the easy plain English explanation. But basically, what it is there's an ecological ceiling that if we go beyond it, we're damaging the planet in a variety of ways. And so all of those problems around the outside is when we exceed that ecological ceiling. On the inside, you've got the social foundations. And so when we have shortfalls in that, that's when we've got all the problems in humanity. So we've got lack of water, clean water, food, peace, and justice. And so the donut economic says, in order to balance and stay within the ecological ceiling and the social foundation, we've got to play in that green space, that safe and just space for humanity, where it's a regenerative and distributive economy. And so really that is an implicit framework that underpinned our thinking, and it's explicitly in the commentary that I did with Ray and Michael Polonsky, which you'll hear from, in, I guess, several months' time. But it's a really useful framework. Please go and have a look at it, or go and have a look at our article that is in Journal of Service Management on service thinking. Okay, so we're talking about problems. Well, what are the problems? I think that's a really interesting question, because it depends on who you are as to whether or not something's a problem. Now, I've put this graphic up not so that you can read it, and you probably can't, it's probably hard on the screen, but what it depicts is a whole range of different types of problems by age group. And if you look at the blue highlighted one, that's the economy. So for the under 30s, economic downturn is the third most important problem. If you look at the over 70s, it doesn't even rate. It's not even in the top 12. And so it's all over the place. And so one of the things that that means is, when we're talking about dealing with problems, we've got to understand who is our audience, who is the cohort that is most affected. And when we do our research, how do we actually promote it to the groups that are going to pay the most attention? And so if you're trying to get your work out there into policy land, then you've got to understand how each of these groups may vote and what the political will might be. And it's not just as simple as, here is the problem and here is the solution. So I thought that was a really nice way of saying problems are complicated. They're complicated from the causes, but they're also complicated based on what is the priority of the problem for different types of people. And you could overlay onto this different countries. I'm sure that if you had a map of the world and you had all these problems, that there'd be different priorities based on what part of the world you live in. And even within a country, different parts of a country will also disagree. And so the idea is, you can't assume that there is this one version of what the problem is. And in many instances, identifying what exactly is the problem is a problem that we have to deal with in research. So I just sort of wanted to flag that it's complex, and we all have different ideas of what the problem is. And this is just the view with the lens of different age cohorts, but there's many other ways that you can view problems. So the lens that we've used in the commentary series is transformative service research. So for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's a field within marketing and service studies. It crosses over. And it examines how services can improve the lives of individuals and society. And basically, instead of focusing only on profit, it focuses on well-being. So the dependent variable is quality of life and well-being. And so there are central tenets, and I'm sure we could debate on all of these, but this is my view about what it is. So the main goal is life quality, physical health, mental health, and social inclusion. It's very human-centric. It considers the needs of humans, both customers and the employees. And that's not to say that it's not about the planet, but the original definition of TSR is very much around that humanity side of things. What I think is really beautiful about TSR is that it aims to be practical and solve real-world problems. So it aims to get things out of the theory and actually being used by people. And I think that's a challenge for academics in that it's important to publish in scholarly journals, but if the only people who read our work are other academics, we're not going to solve anybody's problems. We're not going to actually get uptake. And I think that's the challenge for ServCollab in terms of how do we actually get our work into the hands of policymakers, into the hands of business? How do we shape practice in the real world based on our theory so that we're not an echo chamber? TSR is also a systemic view, and it recognises that wellbeing is influenced at many levels. It's typically not controlled by any one individual, and there is no one individual that is responsible. And it goes beyond single interactions right through to government policy and corporate practices. So I was thinking to myself, what is the central question of TSR? What is the one big thing that, with the hundreds of academics that are working in the field, that have been doing this for the last 13 years and that hopefully will continue into the future? How do we all work together to answer this big picture problem? And this is what I've come up with. How might service systems and interactions create positive changes for individuals, families, communities, and the environment? So it's a plain English I guess, big picture question that we can all see ourselves contributing towards. Now, there might be those of you who want to debate that. That's great. Write it up and submit it to my journal. Okay, TSR is maturing, and these are just some of the contexts that I know that we've done. So health and medical services, we've looked at financial literacy, we've looked at sustainability, we've looked at social justice and digital wellbeing. But this isn't everything, and it doesn't cover all of the different problems. So there is plenty of scope for people to investigate other TSR contexts through these 7 service research themes. They might even look at things that are across contexts as well. So that brings me to the editorial. So this is the fabulous team that put it all together. My co-editor at the time, Mark Rosenbaum, Ray, and Maria Rossetti. And I'm going to steal shamelessly from some of Maria's slides that she's used before when we've presented jointly on the editorial. Maria is I think she's the only Indigenous marketing professor in Australia, and she's brought a really strong light around the contributions that Indigenous thought can have into the service literature. And so if you're interested in those Indigenous perspectives, just have a look at what Maria has done. And she goes from strength to strength. So I'm really proud to work with Maria and have her as part of this editorial. So a very basic historical overview of TSR. It's come predominantly out of the services literature. And so if you think back to the 1980s, and I'm sure Ray can remember these things when he was out there sort of saying services aren't just intangibles, it's a real field, it's a real discipline. When scholars around the world were out there trying to say services matter, and JSM, Journal of Services Marketing, launched in 1986 and is the world's oldest services marketing journal. Fast forward from the 80s, and we've got ServCig has started. We've got these fantastic service journals that are all out there. And then 2013, something changes, and it's all around transformative service research. As a social marketer, I'd like to think that maybe we had some level of influence here. Social marketing is all about doing good with marketing and has been going since the 1970s. And so in many ways, this idea of marketing for good and business for good had started really entering a number of other sub-disciplines of marketing. We saw it in macro marketing. We saw it in transformative consumer research. It had been going in social marketing for 40 years. And then the service literature picked it up. And so there seemed to be this groundswell across all of these different disciplines of actually, it's not just about money. And money is important because without businesses making money, we don't have jobs and we don't have decent work. So money is important, but it's not the only thing. And so suddenly we had this expanded perspective. And then fast forward to 2018, ServCollab launched and recognized the importance of the human experience. And I think it was their very first paper was in Journal of Service Management. That was the first ServCollab paper. And there's been a variety of different things and real growth in the number of people who are wanting to do work in this area. So that brings me to the Sustainable Development Goals. And again, these are the slides Maria put together. So again, shamelessly stealing from Maria. And so the United Nations, a bit of backstory, founded in 1945 after the Second World War, began with 51 countries and is now comprised of 193 member states. It's best known for peacekeeping, peace building, conflict prevention, and humanitarian assistance. And it's an international organisation. In 1992, there was the Earth Summit Agenda, then the Millennium Development Goals, which eventually led to the SDGs. And so the SDGs are a series of interlinked challenges and goals and targets to be achieved by 2030. There's a lot of debate about, how effective they've been. Whether or not we're going to achieve them by 2030 is also debatable. But what isn't up for conjecture is they have shifted the dial and they have got people focused on the topic. It might take longer than 2030 to achieve these goals, but if you don't have a target, you've got nothing to aim for. And so I would say that they're aspirational goals. It'll be interesting as we get closer to 2030 to see if they come out with a revised version of those goals. But nonetheless, they've really guided our thinking and organised the world's wicked problems into 17 areas focused on 5 pillars: people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership. And so that's them here. Most academics are pretty familiar with seeing those. Many universities align with these and keep records in our research management systems of how our work actually aligns to these different SDGs. And so it was meant to be a blueprint for action. It was meant to be about tangibility. It wasn't just ideology and lofty, abstract thoughts. It had a strong implementation focus. It was about global and local action, and it applies to all countries. And I think the term sustainable development is somewhat of a misnomer because I think sometimes people think that's for emerging economies, and it's not. It's for every economy about how do we develop in a sustainable way. And that sustainable does not just mean environmentally friendly. It means in a way that is lasting. So going back to the original sort of meaning of the word sustainability. So it means sustainable financially, sustainable from a human point of view and from a planetary perspective. And countries are measured according to those different targets to keep everyone accountable and to see how we can globally work together to have basically a better world. The SDGs are therefore not someone else's problems. They cover all countries, all services, all of humanity, and all of the planet. And so service researchers have the opportunity, therefore, to participate in many of those SDGs, or maybe just one of them. It's entirely up to you. But the aim is that together as a service research community, that we can all make a difference. So the editorial that we put together was really about organising how might service scholars go ahead and actually work towards it. And so we already knew that service scholars envisaged a better future through the SDGs. We'd already been seeing articles coming out on it. What we knew is that service organisations needed practical ways to achieve a better future. So having the theory is great, but unless organisations are actually actioning it, then all it does is stays online behind mostly a paywall. And so we do need directions for how we need to sustain and regenerate human and planetary systems. So staying within the green, safe area of that donut. And so when Ray and I looked at this, we thought 17 SDGs is too much to try and keep in your head. Also, I knew we couldn't get 17 commentaries written. So we needed to have a practical way of organising it that had utility around it. And so we decided, therefore, to organise around the 7 themes and had a series of commentaries. And so the idea was each of these commentaries was to identify the state of play of what have we currently done in the service literature. And so we encouraged everyone to do a rapid literature review to outline what do we currently know and where might be the opportunities to move forward as a collective. And so we used, I guess, the visual layout of the SDGs in this. So if you put this next to the SDGs, you can see where the origin is. And that was deliberate because the origin of where things come from is just as important. So if you see this and go, that looks kind of like the SDGs, it helps you understand what sits behind and what we're building on. So for each of the themes, you can see the names of the SDGs are down the bottom. We haven't numbered them. We've just popped them in there. And we've put in capitals the essence and the focus of each of the 7 themes. And it was a challenge, wasn't it, Ray, to try and organise it in a way that could be mutually exclusive but collectively exhaustive. Now, you could look at this and say, oh, but, you could put sustainable cities, maybe that could go in with the ecosystems of the planet. Well, yes, you're probably right. This is a rule of thumb kind of heuristic approach. There is interlinking between these different themes. In the same way, there's interlinking between the 17 SDGs. And in some ways, separating it actually creates a bit of a reductionist approach. But as human beings, we need a way of classifying and sorting things in our head so that we can actually move forward. And so if somebody sees another way of organising this that has more utility, then I would encourage you to write up an article and submit it and build on this. So hopefully this is not the final version of the service research themes. This is simply where we are now, and that sometime in the future we might see something else. So I'm going to take you through each one of these themes in brief, and I'm going to give you examples. So this was actually the fun part of preparing the presentations, with looking at what are some good examples of service organisations that embody the service theme. And so the first one is all about enabling well-being. And so the SDGs are about poverty, hunger, good health and well-being. And the focus is moving from individual benefit to collective well-being. And so I've got 2 examples of organisations that do this in Australia. And I picked 2 because they have very different business models. And one of the things that it occurred to me is it would be interesting for somebody to do some research around the different organisations that fit this theme, but the different business models that sit behind it and what might lend strength to one business model versus another. And so this is around the food rescue area. So in Australia, we've got Second Bite. The primary model is it's a warehouse sort of model. They have links to our major groceries outlets, and they have a high focus on translating that food into cooking and meal preparation. And they do actually have heat and eat options that they've converted for those experiencing vulnerability. They work with organisations like the Salvation Army to actually distribute the food. And they link regional charities directly with local retailers when their own trucks can't reach them. Oz Harvest is different. It's a direct rescue, and they go direct to farms. And so if you've got a farmer who's got imperfect produce that they're just going to, plow into the ground, or they might have too many blueberries and they don't have the market for it, or there's a problem with getting produce to market at a particular time of the year, and they're going to end up just at the farm gate, they will go and collect from there. And so Second Bite is more a intermediary strategy, whereas Oz Harvest goes straight to the farm gate. Different business models, and it would be interesting to compare those and say, well, why did each of these organisations choose completely different approaches to solving what is essentially the same problem, and even put together an ecosystem of who are all the players in the food rescue area and how do they contribute collectively. That sort of thing would be, I think, interesting scholarly research. The second theme is services that provide opportunity, and we're talking here about quality education, gender equality, and reduce inequalities. And so when we group these together, it was with the view that education really can help reduce inequality. We know that education is most people's ticket to a better life, and it's all about opportunity. And so I had a look for different organisations and found this one in Sydney. So it's a fashion organisation. It focuses exclusively on women. And it's all about helping women get the right clothing to go and have jobs, to do job interviews, and to be able to work in a new job. What's interesting is that a lot of refugees are employed by this social enterprise, and that's also part of the impact that they report. So what they've reported is 86% of the employees secured their first ever paid Australian job through the program, and that's compares with 30% of refugee women who get employment. So they're really doing their bit with the refugee women to reduce inequalities. They're also rescuing clothing from landfill, and they're helping women be economically empowered to get jobs. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that they're actually doing. What would be interesting, again, is to look at a service like that and find out, how did they put that social enterprise together? Why didn't they just look at recycling of the fashion? Why do some of these other things? Does adding more impact help a social enterprise? And is there a limit to how many problems a social enterprise can deal with before it actually becomes ineffective? So there's some of the useful questions that would be nice to be answered, so that when new social enterprises start up, they have a set of questions to even ask themselves about how focused should they be, and at what point are you overstretched, and when do you need to stop? They don't know, and we want our social enterprises to succeed, and that would make useful research. The third theme is services that manage resources, and this is the commentary that I worked on with Ray and Michael, and it's all about clean water, affordable and clean energy, and responsible consumption and production. So it's the stuff we dig out of the ground in our utilities. This was a really interesting example, again, in Australia. It's called Regenerative Australian Farmers, and they really lean heavily into the regenerative economy, not just circular economy. They really go beyond it. And so their goal is basically to return carbon to the soil, and in doing so, they rehydrate the soil sponge underneath, which essentially heals the ecosystem. So it's not just about prevention, it's actually regeneration. I think that's just really interesting. And so what they do is they provide services to agricultural organisations to actually help do this. They also work in the area of improving water quality as well, improving runoff, and improving local water qualities. And so I think it's a really interesting service that they are providing that goes well beyond the circular economy. The third one was economic services. Now, this is actually the area I think that is the least done in service literature. And interestingly, and Ray pointed this out to me the other day, there's no SDG for financial services. The word financial doesn't appear. And I think that's a massive oversight. And in some ways, I think in the service literature, we've skewed so far to the well-being, psychosocial benefits that we've forgotten to make sure that we're also looking at the money side. Because if we want to include businesses are set up primarily to make a profit, a small business and a corporate. We need to make sure that it is profitable for our businesses to do the right thing. There is very little research in service that actually says, what is the financial benefit to an organisation of doing the right thing? We spend a lot of time saying what the right thing is, but we don't say, and here's how you can also make a profit. If we want to incentivize small businesses to start up and employ in a decent way, We've got to make sure that there's financial viability. And it's almost like we've swung from all financial analysis, which was very much the early days of services, to everything's about the well-being benefit. We've got to come back in the middle and look at, but businesses need to make money out of doing this. And we want to reward businesses that make money and do the right thing. And so that's an area that I've noticed that we're just not seeing enough research coming in. Now, the example I found here really caught my attention. It's from the Queensland government, and it's from their safe work area. And so in Australia, employers have to pay a contribution to the state government for workers' health and safety. So if you get injured at work, then you're able to receive some compensation for the injury, and it could be permanent compensation, or it could be just temporary where you're covered. Safe Work also works with businesses to get injured workers back into the workforce so that then they're not losing out, and there's all sorts of programs. So it's a really important part of what every state and government does in Australia. What I thought was interesting is they've been able to put a dollar value on wellbeing interventions. And I thought that was really cool. So there was a study done by PricewaterhouseCoopers of mental wellbeing interventions, and they found that they returned $2.30 for every dollar invested. If you want to convince a government or a business that it's worth investing in wellbeing, you've got to have the dollars. You've got to speak that language. Because if the government is saying, where do we want to put our money? What kind of initiatives do we want to support? They want bang for buck. So this is a calculator. Doesn't look wildly user-friendly, but basically you put in a whole bunch of information on those different menus, and then it will give you a calculator. It will actually calculate the return on investment, and then you can use that to make decisions or to put in pitches with government or take it to a bank. I would love to see research done on this kind of data, and even having something where we've got benchmarks. So in Australia, the Australian Tax Office has benchmarks for return on investment for all sorts of things for every type of business. So if you're a fish and chip shop and you want to know what your average growth rate should be if you've got 4 employees, you can go to the ATO benchmarks and it will tell you. Unbelievable data, and it's all based out of the tax returns. I would love to see service researchers be able to use some of this data or create their own to say, if you're this type of business and you do this type of intervention, this is the average return on investment based on evidence. I think those sorts of things would be incredibly powerful and very compelling evidence when you're trying to get political will or you're trying to convince a company to actually do something. So check out that particular calculator, Work Health and Safety. I'm sure there's other ones that exist, but that's kind of been my favorite that I found when preparing this presentation. And I'd love to see journal articles that actually put some academic rigor around this. Theme 5 is services from institutions. So this is about fair and sustainable living environments through strong governance. So sustainable cities and communities and strong institutions. And given that we're living in a world where trust in institutions are just falling off a cliff, and that includes trust in universities, we need to be looking at how do we rebuild trust in our institutions, and how do we build strong governance? How do we make sure that it's not at the whim of the leader as to whether or not the institution is strong? Our institutions should be beyond individuals. If individuals are able to wreak havoc, either prime ministers, presidents, CEOs, that's not just a failure of the individual, it's actually a failure of the institution for not having the safeguards in place. So governance is really, really important. And so this is one that I found with the Institute of Community Directors, where they do benchmarking. And, you know, there's a bit of a theme coming through here from this, and the last one is I'd like to see an organisation like ServCollab maybe help by being a data repository where we can benchmark information, where we share data and we get large data sets, and we can actually start to benchmark what works and what doesn't, and what is effective governance. Having a couple of journal articles that might talk to 4 or 5 companies or even 100 companies isn't enough. We need thousands and thousands of organizations where we can see what works and what doesn't, so that other organizations can find similar size, contexts, and go, I can learn from these. And it's only when you've got that level of scale, I think, that you've actually got that robustness. So we need to get beyond surveys and small data sets as a community to start either working with these organizations who've got the data or building our own data repositories. And so they've got benchmarked board surveys that basically say, this is what works, this is what doesn't, across all different contexts. Again, some of these data sets would be amazing to get hold of and to collaborate with. Theme 6 is service ecosystems with the planet. And this moves us from a parasitic mindset to mutualism, where non-human life forms are viewed as co-creators. Now, this again was a really cool product where animals are co-researchers. And so with this particular organizations, it's animal-born ocean sensors. So animals can go where we can't. And basically they have different sensors, and it's called biologging. And wherever they go, we get a picture of the environment they're in, what's going on, and what their experience. It's almost the lived experience live of these different animals. And they can track ocean temperatures, pollution levels, all sorts of things. And it's a really collaborative way of operating with nature. What if we had sensors on trees in a forest? So it allows the trees to talk with us. What if we could convert those signals from a tree into a voice and like literally give a voice to nature? Those are the sorts of things that we can do if somebody puts their mind to it. AI could absolutely come into this, and you could go and talk to a tree, or the tree could plead its case as to what it needs. I don't think this is too far away, and that would be amazing research if anyone, was interested in doing something like that. And then the last theme is collaboration services. So this is the one that Ray was involved with as the commentary, and it's pulling everything together and becoming a hub in the same way that that's what ServCollab is. And so this one, and it's typically Australian, it's toilet paper, and it's called Who Gives a Crap? In case you don't know, a crap is a number 2 in Australia. And so basically the business gives money back. It actually raises money for sanitation projects in developing countries. And it's produced ethically, costs a little bit more. So it's you buy direct from them, and the toilet paper comes all wrapped in very funky kind of packaging, recycled paper, comes straight to your door. What's interesting is the way that they were funded was also collaborative. And so they got their money from Impact Investing Australia. So not only is it important to look at the organisations who are out there doing the good work, is we've also got to look at who finances them? Where does that money come from? And so doing a bit more work on where does that money come from, whether it's social impact bonds, whether it's impact investing. We need more work on what works and what doesn't, and the effectiveness of this. So what impact investing did is they gave a capital loan so that they could get their core product line. They could increase their production volumes and stock on hand to meet demand. And over the duration of the loan, their revenue grew by more than 250%. And so we need to be writing about where this finance comes from and why it's effective. Social impact bonds have become popular in Australia, and it's a way that government can actually finance social work, and the dividend is only paid when the social organisation actually achieves their social impact goals. So it's a really interesting financing arrangement. I'm not seeing anything of that coming through the service literature yet either, but I think that's an area that we need to provide that rigour and that evidence. And so pulling all of this together in our editorial, we have 3 specific habits that we're calling for. We want people to authentically engage with the SDGs before starting their research, rather than mapping them on afterwards. So be authentic about it. Go and read the details of them. They're not just a lofty idea or goal. Go and read what the indicators are. Go and read what the progress is. Engage in it more than just an infographic. We also encourage a critical perspective. We want a critical view of current systems, such as low-wage service work, but we do want that being constructive about the future. Criticising for criticism's sake isn't helpful without paving a way forward. And critical marketing theory can be a useful lens here. We also want visibility. And so when you submit a journal article where you can have free text in the keywords, put service research theme, whatever, put SDG 14 in there. We want it to be searchable and visible in abstracts and keywords in journal article titles. Use the service themes that are published and refer back to them. And so what we're trying to do is move service research from the scurrying around stage to the walking erect stage to beyond, to transform life on planet Earth. And so what then now comes next? Well, we've got the 8 commentaries, and you can see we've got a very wide range of people from all different countries. As I said, some of these teams had never worked before, didn't even know each other. And so I feel really proud of being part of putting these teams together and getting such incredible thought leadership done. And everyone pretty well followed the script. And if anyone's ever tried to give academics instructions about how to follow format, you'll know that that is not an easy task. And the more senior the author, the worse the challenge is. But go and have a look at those in Journal of Services Marketing. Now, this might look familiar to you, but when you look at it, you go, hang on, that's not service. And you're right, it's not. So we've been fortunate enough to have put together a successful proposal with ANZMAC, the Australia and New Zealand Marketing Academy, for a new special interest group on marketing for social impact. So we've got the MSI SIG. It is building directly on the 7 research service themes. And so I wanted to show that direct relationship by having a similar layout, but using the colors from the ANZMAC logo. So you can track back from our service themes here, back to these marketing themes, back to the service themes, back to the SDGs. There's a direct line of visibility. But what we've done is we've added an 8th one in, and we wanted marketing education. And we wanted it specific and different to the theme 2 about quality education, because this is an important part of the Marketing Academy, and it's important that we've got this information coming through our classrooms as well. So we've got a dedicated marketing education theme around social impact in there as well. So no doubt you'll see more of that. This is with Nadia Zanuddin as the chair and myself as Svetlana Bogolemova as co-chair. And so we do have a track at ANZMAC this year on marketing for social impact. If anyone wants to come down under to New Zealand in December, it will be a bit cool because it does get cold in New Zealand in December, even though it is summer. And we'd love to have proposals. We do intend to do special issues in different journals. We're going to do white papers. I want to run a campaign about equal rights for social impact scholars to get social impact taken as equal to scholarly impact. So keep an eye out for that one. So lots of activity coming from Australia and New Zealand that builds directly on the service themes. And for those of you following social impact, the Australian Business Deans Council, so you might have heard of the ABDC ranking list, same organisation. They've just launched their white paper on the societal impact framework for business research. And Chelsea Phillips is one of the leads in this space. So this is all about taking a scholarly approach, but how do you do it? And so they've got a white paper out on the ABDC website that outlines this framework that basically shows the pathway to impact, and showing the different activities depending on whether it's an end beneficiary target, whether it's an organisation, or whether it's academia, and what that impact journey might look like. And they've got a whole bunch of cases about how to evidence what societal impact looks like as well. So there's lots of work in this space, and this is where the service themes can really contribute. And so for those interested, you can go and download that white paper from the ABDC website. So that brings me to the end of my section of this webinar. So back to you, Ray.
Thank you, Rebecca. One of the things I should have emphasized clearly at the beginning is that we have an interactive part that is coming up next. And this is an exciting opportunity for ServCollab to get you involved in discussing these topics. And we have the help of two volunteers from our communities to make that happen. So Florian is one of those volunteers. She is our one of our PhD students. Florian, I know you're in there. The link's somewhere. The way I've got my camera set right now, I can't see you, but I know you're there. And then Claire, who I can see, is the other person. Claire is in the early career community, and they are going to get the audience, all of you, involved in an interactive exercise using a tool called Woo Clap, if I'm pronouncing it approximately right. So, ladies, your turn.
Thanks a lot, Ray, and thanks a lot, Rebecca. It was very insightful talk, and also it helps to have the whole story and explanation of the origin of these service teams, because we are all coming from different parts of the world, but also from different fields. We are not all coming from the service fields here, so it was very helpful, I guess. And maybe before we jump into this interactive part, if someone has a question directly
Sure.
to Rebecca concerning the talk, that might be the time to ask it. Either in the chat or raising your virtual hands. No?
Surely someone has a question or comment. Maybe not.
I've wowed them all.
Yes, there's nothing left to say. So now it's just time to interact, I guess. But well, I just saw a chat comment that it takes time to type. So let's go with that point. There we go. Someone just, oh, Rebecca, I see what you did. You added the grand.
Yeah, and I've just
Yeah.
so Journal of Service Management, and I can see Sir Tan's on the call, has kindly agreed to a special issue, of which I'm one of the co-editors, guest editors, on how can service management research address grand challenges to create social impact. And again, you could use some of the service research themes, and I would expect to see some of those articles to actually frame your paper on that.
Excellent. I see we do have a hand up there from Emmanuel. Emmanuel, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is Emmanuel Mogaji, and thank you so much, Rebecca, for sharing this whole story about the TSR. This is not a question, but just to hear your thoughts about this. This is a reservation I seems to always have with TSR. I believe it operates more when there is justifications and regulations to do good. And you've raised something about financial services and benefit of doing the right thing. This is why I want to ask, what's your thoughts about research in places whereby there is no motivation to actually do the good? So I do research on transport, and this is a struggle I've always had. When you talk about let's improve transport services, transformative service, and people just feel, even in this bad service, people are still rushing to use my bad service. So what is the justification therefore to do good? So I just want to hear your reflection about this, because often I believe TSR works where there is that boundary, the justifications to do good, and you'll be rewarded for it. But how about in cases whereby even where you are providing a bad service, people are still saying thank you? I just want to hear your thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah, look, social marketing has grappled with that problem for decades, and I think that they do a pretty good job of it. Social marketing is one of the hardest jobs on the planet, I think. and in fact, one of the very early articles that prompted, sparked off the field was, how do you sell brotherhood like you sell soap? And so how do you convince somebody to do something that's difficult, that might create pain, and where they may not see a gain until the long term, or maybe not ever? Social marketing has got some answers there actually for you. It's partly about reducing friction points, and it's about finding a core motivation that can be met, but with a different behavior. And so I guess I've got a cynical view about human behavior, in that if you can appeal to self-interest and get the long-term gain, then you've actually got the best of both worlds. And there's been some really creative products and services in social marketing that has exactly answered the challenge you've got there. I won't go into details of that, but if you look in the social marketing literature and on case studies in particular, there's some fantastic examples of how what looked like a really entrenched behavior, where, you know, people were pretty motivated to do the wrong thing, and how social marketing managed to address that by offering a competitive product or service that met the underlying need, but in a good way. So social marketing's got a lot of answers there for you, Emmanuel.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Emmanuel. We have a question in the chat from Jim Sporer. I'll read it. Is there any analysis of linkage between the 7 grand challenges? Which one could be first to cascade to solving the others? And then he adds, any thoughts on which one of the 7 is most important to solve first, or is there another way to think about it?
That's a really good question. I think there are linkages, and Ray and I found that as we're trying to organise these into mutually exclusive categories, and we could have debated for like weeks about, yeah, but it could belong there and it could belong there, and in the end we just sort of had to go, look, we're just going to put it here, and that's just the way it's going to have to be. It's not perfect, but it's done. So I think, so the answer is yes, there are linkages, and these categories are for utility more than, I guess, theoretical validity. It'd actually be interesting for somebody to do a bit of a theory test and even some analysis to see where the mutual exclusivity breaks down. In terms of which one could be solved first, I think that's a really hard challenge. It's a great question. I think it would depend on the context and the resources available. And that would make a great journal article, Jim, to actually say, under what conditions, where do you start? And even having a look at what countries have done and how they've approached the SDGs as to where they got better bang for buck. And was it because they started with a particular problem first, or was it the way that they did it? So I think unpacking that would be fantastic.
Thanks, Rebekah.
All right, good. Any other questions before we move to the interactive portion?
Yeah, there was another 2 I saw in there. There was one
yeah,
by
okay. Yeah, I'm missing
Mona.
that, yeah.
What are the little everyday steps I can take to make sure I'm contributing to this work? Seek partners for the research. Try and collect your data and do the work with real organisations. It's great if they can fund you, but that's not always possible. Many of my early projects were pro bono, where I just needed to get work with an organisation to make sure that there was a translation pathway. So I think try and find a partner where you can work together on a real world problem that they've got that also solves a theoretical problem, where you can apply for grants and funding. That's great, but it's very hard to do that when you've not got a track record. Hitch your wagon to a star. Find somebody who seems to be able to pull in the money and then offer your services. You know, anyone who came to me and said, I'm brilliant at doing conjoint analysis, and so, you know, if you want to do any work in that area, I'd be like, that's great, because then I don't have to do that. So figure out what your specialty area is and pitch to people who've got the skills you don't, but just start working with real world organisations in some capacity. And then there's one from Roberto. Methodology. Are there methodologies regarding analysing this topic? Look, any methodology, every methodology, I think it's about finding the right methodology to answer the question. So for the same service theme, depending on what the research question is that you're asking, it could be a systematic literature review, or it could be using a large, linguistic model, or it could be case study research. So it really comes down to what is the question that you want to answer as to what is the methodology. There is no one methodology. There's no right methodology. Although some journal editors might dispute that.
Any other questions before we transition? Thanks for the remaining questions, some excellent issues to raise. Obviously, all of the things we're working on in the service research teams are very hard problems. And very hard problems will take a lot of people to work on, and a lot of hard thought and interaction, which is why the next section is so important. So it looks like we're ready for that, Claire and Florian.
Yeah, thank you. So I am Claire. Hello, everyone. So I'm a member of the ServCollab early career communities, and we've been working with the PhD community together to make that webinar work. So this time it will be us, myself and Florian from the PhD community animating this interactive part, and then it will be other members from the ServCollab communities. So this interactive session will take place on a special website that is called WooClub. And to connect, I will need you to scan this QR code with your mobile phone, or to go to this website, wooclub.com, and type this code. So this is the code to access this event. So maybe while we are waiting for you to connect, we can present a bit the philosophy, the why we are doing it. So we are all here together, all working on research teams that can come together and that can help each other. So instead of just staying passively receiving information that is already very insightful, let's just start a conversation. Let's start a conversation and see where it goes. So it will all depend on you. So we really hope that you will be there and helping us to make that interactive part working. Also, Florian, if you want to start with the first question or introduce the PhDs or the people.
Yeah, I may start by introducing perhaps also the PhD to the other person who are joining us. Since I see that when waiting a bit for the other participant. So first, sorry for this very weird settings, but as I already mentioned, my webcam doesn't work very well. So here's my phone webcam. But so in the PhD community, our very purpose is, as already small community, we wanted to, how to say, not really to have an impact, but at least to think about like, okay, we're still PhD, but what can we do as PhD? How can we, what kind of very strong foundations can we build as a PhD? And also a part of that, a really good part of the ServCollabs groups was to match together this PhD part and with this junior team. And so that's what we are very glad to be able to hold this seminar. So a seminar that was also created as a joint initiative from the PhD part who wanted to have that kind of seminars, but also of the junior scholar who also desire to have this kind of seminar. So that's the reason why also we're here. I don't know whether there's still some PhD intergroup who are not already part of the ServCollab community, but in this case, very feel free to join. We are waiting. We are welcoming people every month, and this community is starting to be bigger, and it's going to be very great. I don't know, maybe we can start. I said the number are not really moving well.
Let's start.
Yeah, so I, as a first questions, wanted to ask these questions of just introducing each others, and please check which kind of the 7 research theme resonate the most with you and your work.
Yeah, so just as a reminder for those that, so normally you see the answer on your phone. So if you need a reminder of what are the research teams, this is so we can see that only 2 of you could answer. So normally you can select several answers, just to try to select the one that you think are the closest to your work. It can be actual work or it could be future work that you want to dig deeper into. Yeah, we don't want to influence your votes right now. So.
Okay, we start to have 52 answers. And still waiting for the 9 remaining participants.
Or maybe you don't have any team. Maybe we should have included that. But it will be a question after if you feel like there is a missing team on that. Okay, so maybe we can have a look at who is in the audience. Okay, so we see that clearly we have a huge majority of people on research team 1 and 2, and the planet is the research team that is less represented so far.
Yeah, but I still do have some intuition that maybe with your presentation, Rebekah, is going to infuse the idea to other people to maybe start to deep dive deeper into this subject. Because for me, it was a kind of new, to be honest, a new observation that you made on that I found it was very, very cool.
Yeah, I think that's a huge opportunity there because I'm not surprised that service is first focused on the humans, and so like the well-being is huge area in service, and actually humans has been as the center of the scene for decades. So yeah, I'm not that surprised here, but maybe if someone has another opinion on what is happening here, you can always share on the chat or open maybe your microphone. I cannot see you anymore, but I guess that Florian, you can manage the chat.
I will struggle also as I am still here with my phone. But apparently there's no more questions, so I guess we can move to the next question.
Okay, so now that we know where we situate ourselves inside those research team, let's dig a little deeper into what exactly are you doing with that team? So how do that connect to your own research interest or career path? But in terms of, do you have a concrete project related to that you want to share to the audience? Do you have a project that you did or that you want to do? Something that touched you maybe in the news or in the current health earth problem. So that is more a time for sharing. Yeah. So, okay, so that's very nice that you could spot the feature of full clap already. So if you like an idea that is already given, you can also put your like on it and not writing it again. But that's this question is going beyond this just designing of the project and publication strategy is something that is important. But do you have a concrete project that you would like to share with other people here? We have seen that we are plenty working on opportunities on well-being. Maybe the two that are working on the planet. It would be super interesting that you share what you are doing concretely with that, what you plan to do, what is your objective, your goal. Yeah, we have seen that Rebecca has made a plenty of call for paper. So that's a very nice idea to align future projects on them.
Yeah, the base to share, a base position to share with students is also a very nice one. Because I think nowadays it's even more important to really distillate that types of knowledge, not just for us, but really to include also our student in it. Especially since students are really keen to receive that other perspectives from marketing, from service, than I would say the traditional one that we've been selling so far. Do you have, Rebecca, some types of material you may, for instance, use in classroom?
Let me think about it. Well, I involve my external partners to be clients for my projects. So I get them to come along with a problem. And so, for instance, an innovation class where we do service design, I had a Mission Australia come on and talk about homelessness. And the students had to design a good or a service to address homelessness. So they had to develop a persona, a person. And so I then had the industry partner come in at the end and judge the top 5 assignments presented to the industry partner at their premises, and then we gave a prize, which was a prize to the winning assignment. And the idea is the external industry partner got some great suggestions and ideas, and the students got to work on a real world project and got a, and some money, which was always helpful for them. And so, yeah, every semester I had a different real world client as to give the pitch. And actually, one of those led to a grant. So that homelessness project ended up leading to a grant. We got $150,000 from the Queensland government to implement one of the things that the students had actually said, and that became the Women's Butterfly Project. So, education is a great way of linking to a partner in a pretty low stake way, providing some value, and then we leverage what we'd learned in it and actually went ahead and won a grant.
Yeah, I see that we have plenty of answers right now. I try to group them into teams.
I think it'd be great to see the interconnections between the research themes. Have a look at decent work and maybe quality education. What are those intersections? What might go together, rather than separating them as much as the way that we do it. We don't see a lot of cross SDG research. We see within SDG research.
I've seen that someone has said an intended consequence of service inclusion. It sounds like a dark side of service inclusion. Is it?
Yeah, well, do you mind if I explain it?
Yeah, of course. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning, guys. Hi, Ray and Rebecca. Thanks for the session. Actually, I'm working on a project right now. I just came back from the Amazon rainforest. I spent like a week doing a ethnographical study with indigenous people. And what's happening is like there is a big movement now that they are installing a lot of like Starlink antennas, so the indigenous people can have access to internet and everything that a cell phone can provide. And that's quite transformative because they can have access to healthcare and a bunch of stuff. But one thing that shocked me, and that's why I was doing this research, is how the technology has a dark side for people. So we are talking, let's say my entire career, I believe that inclusion is a positive response to help vulnerable people or people in vulnerable conditions. However, when this access to the internet was gave to these people, these indigenous people in the Amazon, it has created a lot of issues that we as Westerners we can see as well. Is it okay? Can you hear me? Is it fine?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So sorry, I'm not gonna be. I'm gonna try to be short here. What I was observing there is that people are immersed on their phones now. They don't want to hunt. They don't want to fish. They don't want to participate in activities. They've been exposed to pornography. Imagine that people are like naked, exposed to pornography. It's kind of like a conundrum that we need to understand,
Mhm.
but also like exposed to betting. So they are spending money on this and being involved in scams. People leaving these tribes. So it was a week there that I was like, and I'm working with Alison Gilbert from Australia as well. So we were trying to understand what are these unintended consequences of service inclusion, because it's real. I still believe that inclusion is great, but when inclusion is not controlled or not, we don't have protocols for this kind of services, then we can get these kind of problems. That's why I was gonna ask actually Rebecca what she thinks of it, but I couldn't find the raising hand button here, so I was like, ah, I'm not gonna ask. But yeah, so that's the. I just arrived like on Friday from a week trip there to the Amazon, and it was great. When I say going to the Amazon, it's going to a place that you cannot get there without a small plane. So it's really remote. Okay, so that's how it works.
That sounds fascinating research.
Mhm.
And I really love the idea of looking at that critical thinking. I think sometimes we tend to evangelize a new area, and then we stop we're not critical. And I remember when emotional intelligence came out and everyone was like, yeah, more emotional intelligence, so good, yeah. And then people started going, yeah, but maybe it leads to burnout. Hitler was pretty high in emotional intelligence too. So it's a field doesn't reach maturity until you start to be able to understand the negatives, or where the boundary conditions might be for different contexts and different cohorts. And I think that I really like the idea that you've come across, is that what are the problems created that are unintended? I think that's great.
Yeah, and I think that's
Thank you.
also related to technology, especially in your
Mhm.
case, or is it beyond technology?
No, it's
Because
totally related to. I don't know if that's a question, but it's
yeah,
totally
yeah,
related.
that's for you the question, and because I see that we have another people here um, on technology and well-being, and so it might
Mhm.
be interesting to have the opinion of that other people if the
Yeah,
person is still here. Um,
yeah.
so maybe this person is gone, but yeah, in actually this dark side of technology is
Mhm.
Mhm.
salient here because we see that it can help, but also has an intended consequence. So
I
yeah,
think
a lot of
it's.
yeah.
I think the problem is even worse because we ourselves here, as we can say, you were knowledgeable people, and we still struggle to understand what's real and what's not real. For example, with AI. But then when you go to a context
Mhm.
where people they are very naive, I would say, in terms of like digital literacy. They cannot understand, they cannot get their head around. They would ask me things like, what do they do with my picture when I put on the internet? Like, can they make money with that? Can I go to jail if I post a picture there? So I think these cases are, they are more pressing when we have a population that has less understanding, um, because they are isolated. So again, it's not just because of the topic that I'm working, but I think it's something quite cool to keep exploring in different situations.
I think that we have answer from a lot of people already, and a lot of common points too. So a lot of people that will align their projects on this, also keeping track by their universities, or also more and more in the publication. Um, I don't know if we stay a little bit longer here, or you want to switch to another. I see that in the chat you have to. Ah. Yeah. You can also connect in the chat if you see that there is
Mhm.
some message that match your interest or match what you are currently doing. Because here we try to animate, but we cannot talk about every answer here. So this is also the goal that you see what is the closest to what you are actually doing, and maybe create some start of a conversation, start of a collaboration. I see that here we have the likes, and here we have the Sustainable Business Lab, where you actually connect. You connect academics and industry partners. So you manage to do this collaboration with the field. Maybe the person is there and wants to talk about it.
Yes, Florence over here. I'm the coordinator for the Sustainable Business Lab. I'm an economist, and I belong to the Faculty of Business and Law. But our university has a sustainability committee, which focus on the SDGs. In fact, in another answer, I also shared how our research is like coded according to the 17 SDGs. So my lab, of course, focus on the business aspects. So our research not only coded under different SDGs, we also organize events like seminars to bring together academics, industry people, our own business connections. In seminars like that, we share, the very practical experiences in the business world, how to do good, do well, and be financially sustainable at the same time, and how like it can be there can be regional challenges at the same time, like global geopolitical challenges. So my platform is a platform for this kind of knowledge sharing, collaboration, and as a researcher, these are inspirations, ideas for me to materialize this kind of like research projects. Yeah, just a little sharing about
Yeah.
what we do.
Yeah, so if you're interested, you have the link in the comment.
Yeah, you can like take a look at our recent research. Yeah.
Okay, so let's advance to the next question. So we have discussed about what you are actually doing, and what we have presented so far, but maybe there are new challenges that emerge that are not properly addressed by the research teams. So this is a time just to reflect on what you would like to see more in terms of research, in terms of challenges to tackle. Or maybe something that you do yourself, because we already talked a bit about this TSR. What are the boundaries of TSR? Maybe the research teams exclude some kind of problem, even if the goal was to be exhaustive with all the SDGs, but maybe something is missing. Financial services. So what do you mean by that? Why the others are still thinking?
Oh, well, that was me.
Oh,
It's because it's not explicit. We haven't got one that's explicit. You go, oh, that's where banking fits. So it's sort of loosely under economic, but not explicit. And in fact, there's no SDG that's financial either, which is interesting given that money makes the world go round.
you mean access to like the loans and stuff, or access to the banks?
Oh,
Like
all
the
of that. All that
blockchain?
financial management, financial
Oh,
literacy.
yeah. And also I had a
So
question. Yeah, sorry.
they're all implicit, but they're not explicit.
And I also had a question about the new initiative that you launched, and you add one specific team around specifically education. Why did you need to add this, as it was already in the opportunity research team?
Because we wanted to cover off on what academics do. So academics do research, but they also do teaching, and it wasn't explicit enough about the scholarship of teaching and educational materials or learning from your students. And so that's why we wanted to have that as equal recognition, because it's a pretty fundamental part of our job. And to get people to think about how do we get stuff into the classroom and how do we engage our students, back the other way.
Yeah, we see that we have another people that said cyber residence, e-safety.
Mm-hmm.
Does that person wants to explain a bit further? But that actually makes sense, because all the technology is maybe a part of the teams, but it's not explicit. And maybe that technology is bringing a higher risk that needs to be tackled.
I'm going to head off. It's 11:30 at night. So thank you all very much.
Yeah, thanks.
And
Thanks a lot. Thanks a
I'll
lot.
see many of you at ServCig.
Yeah.
Thank
See
you,
you,
Rebecca.
Pleasure. Well, let's maybe move then to the last part of it for interactive. Yeah, Florian, do you want to
Yeah,
present?
and so I can close with these very small questions, but how can service researchers encourage service systems that serve humanity? So it could be very small idea that you have, guys, or it could be maybe bigger. So really, no matter the scales, what can we do to really encourage service systems that serve humanity?
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be the final answer either, because that question is big. It's very big on purpose. So it's maybe what you do at your scale, at your personal level. So we had plenty of answers already, like what you do in your classroom, what you do in your research, what you do with the practitioners. If you had to summarize in like one big thing, what is the biggest priority that we should look at if we want to bring those teams further?
Reinforce multi-stakeholder collaboration.
I don't know if you can see.
Yeah,
I can just
yeah,
maybe
go ahead.
explain. Just that I think as a service scholar, we are very well positioned in order to improve collaboration among different stakeholders. And that relates very much to my research, which is why I wanted to really emphasize this part, is that we have the power to make the links, bridges between the scholars, between businesses, NGOs, and really to increase this collaboration in order to improve of not only individuals but society as a whole, I would say. And I think that's very important to be able to observe to observe these actors and to see how we can leverage these actors and make bridges in order to improve well-being as a whole, I would say.
Yeah, I think you're right, and that's also very difficult to do. So like bringing together all the interest of the different stakeholder, and different words, different way of
It takes
thinking.
time, yeah. But that's where qualitative research can also bring value in order to take time to discuss, to understand what's the key challenges and key needs and the stakes also, in order to try to find an in-between situation which is beneficial for everyone, I would say.
Yeah, and I will jump on that because I mean, for now, the answer really focus also on this collaboration idea. Pro bono works with organizations promoting epistemic justice with collaborations with the people of the research. So I do really think that for now, what really go out of those answers is maybe the idea that for now the researchers, and I mean this is something that I guess in TSR we're a bit accustomed to, but we should not remain in our ivory towers anymore and really try to disseminate our field, but also to make some collaboration with other peoples, to really make some collaboration with the peoples we want to or people want to help also at the end. Creating new generation of manager and businessmen. Uh,
Yeah, and I had a question for the person that has put the pro bono work. Did you already experience that? And do you think that's a way to facilitate this collaboration between different stakeholders?
Can you repeat, Claire,
Yeah,
please?
it's the pro bono work. So this person that has put this comment, if the person is still there,
Okay.
no? Okay, so actually the people they just put the comment and they disappear. But that could be maybe a solution. You are here? No? Okay. So I said that we are also like looking beyond regulated markets. What do you mean by looking beyond the regulated market? Oops. What what happens? Okay. Okay, so does someone that is still here wants to share what he has written? I think that a lot of ideas goes in the same direction of like collaborating with the people that are concerned by the problem. So looking beyond us, if I may summarize this comment, looking beyond like the majority in the healthy population, we have collaborating with the governments. That might be also, and yeah, I cannot imagine, but I think that it's quite hard to get your research inside the policy.
Okay, I think maybe we can stop soon. I don't know what you're thinking, Claire.
Yeah. Okay, let's stop it there. I think it's still open, by the way, if you still have ideas. Your answer to the book club, they are also recorded, and we could also send them to you if you are interested to know about what each of us are doing and you want to go further on that. So,
That would be
Florian,
great if you could share them, Clara. If you'll send that summary to COSI and me, we can share it with, we'll be sending out notifications of the YouTube being available so we can include that in what we send out to everyone. And there were people who weren't able to be here even though they were registered, so they can get that link too and catch up on what they missed today. So it looks like it's time to wrap up. We've obviously gone a little bit over our 90-minute of time that we had promised. Obviously, lots of things to talk about, lots of interesting ideas. And thank you, Claire. Thank you, Florian, for this part. It's a very interesting exercise that we just experienced. And I should emphasize to everyone here in this webinar that this is our first of 8 webinars on these service research themes. So this was sort of an experiment to see how these things will work. And each time we will go to the next topic. So the next one we expect will be on well-being in approximately 3 months. and we will continue to work on developing and building momentum for these topics. And if you are by chance in Braga for the ServCig conference, Kosai and I will welcome you to our pre-conference workshop Wednesday, June 10th, 9 o'clock. Some of you I know are actually registered for that event. That one is free as a pre-conference event. Kosai and I will be talking about what we're calling the Wisdom Quest for unifying the 7 service research themes on the theme of wisdom. Our species is supposedly Homo sapiens. We are supposedly wise. We think we can do more, and we're hoping to, with your help, do more. The collaboration theme that's in the ServCollab name is the key reason that that is the effort. We can't do it alone. Nobody can do anything alone. We're a social species. And the wonderful thing about what we're doing today is that it's possible to do things electronically that were not possible for most of human history. And in fact, not even that well done even 10 years ago. Things have changed a lot. And if we're lucky, they'll change a lot for the better across the world. So we're going to be trying to make that possible. Kosai, any last words on your side?
Well, I'm so happy to see the first ServCollab Communities webinar being such a great success. I would like to thank, of course, Claire and Florence for leading the interactive part and for also the devotion during the preparation period. Not to forget also the remaining teams, the teams members, the PhD webinar team members and the early career webinar team members. I can see that Victor is here. I think Roberto is in one of these. The remaining members, I think Florence is also here. Thank you very much, all of you. Kiara is in one of these teams. So thank you as well. Great job, everyone. I hope that we just keep going with these webinars, and then after the 8th, we can find something else to talk about.
Great. And if you aren't already a member of one of the communities, if you're a PhD student or early career, you can sign up to be part of those communities on our website. You can also sign up for our newsletter, which, as I mentioned earlier at the beginning, will be sent out very soon. So you can learn about some of those things and keep up to date with what we're up to. So with that, I think it's time to stop. Thank you all for being here. This has been a wonderful opportunity to interact across the planet, across a lot of time zones. But clearly there's an interest in what we're doing, and we hope to keep building it. So thanks for your support. With that, we'll sign off. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Bye.